Spider-Man No Way Home. Yeah. Spider-Man No Way Home is the story about Peter Parker who, after the previous events of Far From Home, his identity has been ousted. And right after that, he goes to Doctor Strange because his life is kind of in a crisis, and Doctor Strange ends up messing up a spell that could potentially help him, leading to catastrophic events that Peter Parker now has to face and fix. That's really all I can say about this movie that would have been spoiler free. And this is most definitely going to be a spoiler filled episode because I can't talk about anything about this movie without it being spoiled. So if you haven't seen the movie, if you haven't even seen any trailers for the movie, all that sort of stuff, it's this is your final warning. This is the only warning I'm going to give you. Click away now if you haven't seen it. We're going to be talking in depth about this movie. But in general, what are my general thoughts about this movie? It sucked. It's the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. It's not good.
I don't believe this. I don't believe you.
I'm joking, of course, obviously. I'm wearing a freaking Sinister Six Spider-Man shirt. I got a spider dog back there for the iPods back in the day. You know, those things. You know what I'm talking about. I have a Spider-Verse poster right there. Like, I love everything Spider-Man. And would I give this the highest grade possible? I don't know. I think I'd give it a pretty high grade for sure. But man, is this movie got a lot going for it other than just the things that you may think are in there or what you're speculating is in there. I want to start out this review with just a couple of negatives that I have. The only glaring negative that was in this movie that I saw is the dreaded Marvel humor that is in there. I think that there are some moments in this movie that are really funny and they really hit. I think there are some great comedy in the action that they do, and I think the action is done well. And I think there's a lot of great emotional things in this movie that is done extremely well. But with some of the emotional things and with some of the tonal things that they have going on in this movie, sometimes they kind of do a hard shift for a joke that doesn't land sometimes. And that's a bigger issue other than just this movie. This is a Marvel Entertainment issue that they have completely sold out for, just trying to make the audience laugh as much as possible while also trying to convince them that the story is serious. That was the only glaring issue that I had in this movie for myself personally. One of the issues that's brought up about this movie a lot in some of the reviews and some of the people's opinions about this movie is the Doctor Strange thing. Doctor Strange, since the first trailer was dropped, was shown as kind of a strange, quote unquote, kind of guy about being like, he's all like super confident in himself and casting the spell, and you just thought it's not Doctor Strange. And I have to say, I didn't really see much of a problem with this at all. If you'd seen the original Doctor Strange movie that came out years ago, hell, even if you saw some of Infinity War and Endgame, although they kind of portray him as like this all-powerful being in those movies, he really is at his core a really cocky, arrogant dude who has confidence in his powers that he has. This is some other stuff that I've seen on the internet that I genuinely thought was correct, is that Doctor Strange has had one full movie by himself prior to this. He had his Doctor Strange movie. He had brief appearances in Ragnarok. He had a good portion of screen time in Infinity War, and he was pretty different between the other stuff in there. And then he was only in there for about the last portion of Endgame, right? So this is the second time we're seeing Doctor Strange in a pretty good amount of time throughout the entire movie. He is in this movie a good amount, and I think it's great. I think Benedict Cumberbatch plays his character very well. But you have to understand with this character is that the intentions of his character, he's almost like Tony Stark in some ways, not all of them, but his, innate ability of being like, I'm really good at what I do and I think I could take care of this. And they mentioned that the spell that they wanted to use, because they don't have the time stone in this universe anymore, is a very, like, the spell is just not like an easy casting, like this spell has a lot of consequences if things go wrong, and that's why Wong doesn't want anything to do with it, because he knows how dangerous the spell can be. So in the defense of Doctor Strange's little arc that he has in this movie involving that spell, I think they do a good job with what they have. Now, the story is definitely rushed. Like, once they get to what they need to do with the reality bending of Doctor Strange and then letting in all the supervillains from different universes, like, that's when the story really picks up. But I also did like the beginning a lot too, because, I mean, there is a montage of Peter kind of going through life after he's been outed with his Spider-Man identity, and he kind of still tries to go to school and he tries to get to MIT, and I liked that stuff in the movie too. Do I feel like that there were more things that they probably could do with that? Sure, but this movie was not about that, and I think a lot of people need to realize that while yes, this is a very nostalgia heavy movie, this is a movie that wants to bank on you wanting to see nostalgic things that you know and love. That's why it's there. And I feel like you should appreciate this movie more, because we're not going to have anything like this probably ever again. It's going to take a long time for something anywhere close to this ever happening ever again. I thought the characters were really good in this movie. I think that the biggest improvement out of everyone in this movie is Zendaya. I do like Tom Holland's Peter Parker in this movie a lot more, and we will talk about that a little bit later. But Zendaya has been steadily becoming better as each movie came out. In Homecoming, she wasn't really used as much, as she wasn't really all that great in that movie because they didn't use her correctly, in my opinion. Far From Home came out, and I thought she did a way better job in that. And now in this movie, she really nails everything that she needed to. She hits on the emotional beats very well. She has a great relationship with Peter. I just genuinely think that Zendaya does a really nice job in this movie. And now let's get on to the villains before we get to Peter later on. Wow, the villains in this movie. They really did a number on these villains for a couple of things, right? Doc Ock, Alfred Molina's Doc Ock is just great. There's really nothing you can do about that. He's just a great, great guy. And Peter's objective throughout this movie, after all the villains have kind of come together and he now has all the villains, Aunt May convinces him that rather than sending them back to their universe, they need to try and help them. They need to try to cure them because they obviously are not well. And I think Alfred Molina coming back as Doc Ock and having the arm still controlling him, he was great in that. And then when Peter helps him and fixes the chip for his arms and he kind of goes back to his reserved scientific self again that he was before the chip got broken, I thought that was really great to see, because you forget that how great he was before he had the arms too, and before he was corrupt. In Spider-Man 2, he was just a really genuinely good guy trying to do good for the world. And it was really nice seeing him being oh my God, the voices are over, it's done, I have control again, and I'm not a bad guy, I'm not under the influence of this anymore. I thought that was really great to see. Electro, Jamie Foxx's Electro is so much better in this movie than he was in Amazing Spider-Man 2. He is way more charismatic. They understand the character a lot better. He does have a little bit of the Electro flair from the comics, where he's I want some of that power. I like this new feeling I have, sort of the goofiness of Electro is still there, but it's handled a lot better in this movie. I think Jamie Foxx does way better in this movie than he did in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, for sure. And the two villains that I don't think really did that good of a job, they were very much a background kind of feel, were the Lizard and Sandman. I think that those two characters really didn't do much for me, and quite honestly, they, especially Sandman didn't have much to do in this movie, as far as he was a bad guy from beginning to end, because if you remember Spider-Man 3, he kind of drifts off into the distance, and he stays as a good guy. Whereas in this movie, they try to shove him in there, and he's yeah, he's still Flint Marko as a good guy, but he was also he's just there. Same thing with the Lizard. They didn't really have much to do. I will say, though, the positive thing about Flint Marko as the Sandman in here is that the comedy that they put with him that he never had before, I thought worked fine. I think they tried to give him a little bit more personality in this movie, considering that in the last movie, he was just trying to help his daughter, and then I'm made of sand. So I think they did a way better job as far as trying to give him a little bit more of a personality in this movie than they did in Spider-Man 3. And that's the major thing about this, is that there's so many villains in this movie that it does not fall into that Spider-Man 3 syndrome in this movie. It for sure just basically knows what they need to give you out of everyone, because Everyone's already had their backstory in different movies, and they're banking on the fact that you know that. And I'm pretty sure that this is the best approach that they could have done, because giving everyone their own separate little intros and this, that, or whatever just doesn't make sense for this story. You know that they're from different universes. It would take way too much time to establish anything for every single person here. So it was best to just let everyone just kind of be who they are, and the audience has the already the pre-knowledge of like, yeah, I know what these kind of characters have gone through and what they're all about. And let's get down to Willem Dafoe. Bravo, sir. Bravo. Now, I'm not saying this because Spider-Man 2002 is my favorite Spider-Man movie so far. I'm not saying this because I'm a shill for Willem Dafoe. I'm not saying this because of all these things that you may call me as a fanboy of sorts for the Green Goblin. He is, without a doubt, way scarier in this movie. He's way more intimidating this movie. His presence just takes over the screen, because when he has that speech that he has, as I hit the mic, when he has that speech that he does, when he's talking about, Peter, you're struggling, and he's all like getting in his goblin feel, and he's got that weird smile going across his face, and his eyes are widening, and he's looking all crazy. This is amazing. He is the MVP of this movie, along with Tom Holland, because I think Tom Holland did a great job, but Willem Dafoe just has this different presence on the screen. You really feel it with Willem Dafoe in this movie. And what I also really loved about Willem Dafoe in this movie is the action scenes are just so damn good with him. The action scenes are good throughout the entire movie, don't get me wrong, but Tom Holland and Willem Dafoe have a fight in the condo that they're staying at. It's like Happy's condo, because they're trying to stay away from the public and because of his identity being released. So they're staying there, and they're trying to fix up all the villains and cure them there. So they manage to cure Doc Ock, and then Peter's spider sense is kind of going off, and then he realizes that the Goblin has taken over, and he was faking it this entire time, and now stuff's about to go down again. So when the Goblin is fighting him in that building, it is remarkable. It is, I don't know if I'd call it better than the abandoned hospital scene. I think that scene is still very good as well, but it's up there with that. These guys are beating the hell out of each other. They're going through floors, they're going through windows, they're banging along the walls. It is great to see. And really, the stuff with Peter Parker in this movie really starts right about here. There's more stuff to come with this, but the progression of Peter Parker turning more into Spider-Man and being that webhead that we all know and love, that people like to compare from the first two movies of him being on his own and being like more with, being on the streets kind of. This is where it starts, because the Green Goblin then decides, after Aunt May tries to help Peter in the fight, that she's the one that's making him do this in this moral code that he's going to have now, and he wants to take that away from him and make him think that, you can do so much more with all the power that you have because you're too weak, because you have codes that you need to go along. Then the glider comes through the doors and it bangs her around, and then the Goblin tries blowing her up, but then Peter knocks it away, leading to an emotional scene with Tom Holland where he and Aunt May are talking, and Tom's like, I shouldn't have done this. I should have listened to Strange. We shouldn't have helped him. And Aunt May's like, what do you mean? We helped Doc Ock. We helped these guys. It's what we do as people. We help people. And then she gives the coveted, with great power, there must also come great responsibility. And then when she, is kind of like, I need to catch my breath, and she kind of falls down. And then it's a sudden realization that she's dying in his arms. Tom Holland gives a phenomenal like performance here. It is so great to see, and he's had some good performances in these emotional scenes before, but this one really works, and this one is very emotional. And when it happened, I couldn't believe it. I honestly couldn't believe it. I thought that Marisa Tomei's character was going to stay in this for a while as Aunt May, and now that she's gone, I was like, okay, that's going to be a turning point for him, and I can't wait to see the rest of this movie. And man, did it shine throughout the entire movie. This then leads to being Ned and MJ left for Peter, and then when they try to find him, they kind of get caught in a web of sorts, because they try to find Peter Parker, and Doctor Strange is now caught in a mirror dimension after Peter fought him. So Ned has like his ring that he can make portals with. And when he says to try to find Peter Parker and does his little thing, he then finds a different Spider-Man. And it ends up being Andrew Garfield. And oh boy, did I love seeing that. I'm not the biggest fan of Andrew Garfield's movies, but seeing him back in that suit, seeing how happy he looked, seeing like all the things that came with that scene, like you could tell that it meant a lot to him, and it meant a lot to us too, because he really did deserve more than what he got. And I think he's a really good Spider-Man. I just thought that the Peter Parker aspect didn't work for him. So when he showed up, I really lost my mind for that. I was like, oh my god, like this is really cool. And then my boy Toby, when he finally came back as well as an older Peter Parker, oh, it was amazing. It was really amazing. I'll never forget that. That was such an amazing feeling. It's a once in a lifetime sort of experience that you're gonna get. Man, was it something that we all wanted and we all got. You knew. The people that thought that they weren't there, you knew. You couldn't tell me. I knew that they were in it. They weren't gonna let that happen. You knew. This then leads towards the last kind of portion of the movie where the Peter Parkers kind of come together and they kind of look at Tom Holland and they're like, we know what you're going through. And, they, reiterate that with great power comes great responsibility, and that Aunt May have not died for the wrong reasons. And so then they get to work at finding a cure for the rest of these guys and being able to send them home, possibly with a better second chance than they were going to be before. This then leads to a really cool, awesome fight scene at the end of the movie with all the Spider-Men fighting these villains at the Statue of Liberty. And then Doctor Strange ends up coming back after being trapped in that mirror dimension when he sees that all the Spider-Men are kind of helping them and curing them. And I just love how at the end of the movie, when the box that he uses to kind of trap the spell and hopefully try to fix everything gets blown up by the Green Goblin, Doctor Strange now has to handle the reality starting breaking through. And once they get down to everyone's cured and now they got to worry about this multiverse thing again, Strange can't do anything about it because they're coming through now. And then Peter makes the ultimate sacrifice in his way and making the mature choice in being that, let's make everyone forget that I was Spider-Man. Let's make everyone forget about Peter Parker. That means Doctor Strange will forget. That means Ned's going to forget. That means MJ's going to forget. And it is a great scene. Yet again, Peter now bears the responsibility of Spider-Man and realizes if things aren't going to get better until I decide that I need to change things. That was a great thing for Tom Holland's Spider-Man. He's had a lot of people holding his hands throughout this entire series of movies, and I do love him in these movies, but he is finally making these decisions that are going to progress him as being like a solo kind of character and being a person that can handle his own. Because, yes, the major complaints with these Tom Holland movies is that he's had way too much help with different people, and I understand that, but this is going to take him to Spider-Man's roots almost. It's going to take him to his like being alone and working through his problems on his own. And I really, really, really enjoyed that. I think that was a great decision for him. So when Strange makes that spell happen, he goes to meet up with MJ and Ned again after they had forgotten him to try to convince them that they are friends again and like they had all these memories. He sees how well off that they are without really knowing him. And then in another really emotional thing, you're kind of like, he's just not going to do anything. He's just going to live on his own and have them live their best life because he knows that's what's best for them. And then the movie ends with him living in his apartment on his own, having a couple of things to remember his friends by with some Legos and some other things. He makes his own suit yet again because now you have to realize after the fact that Tony's dead, Happy doesn't know him now too, Aunt May's dead, like he has to make his own suit again. He doesn't have the Iron Spider suit. He doesn't have the Tony Tech suits. He now has to make his own suit again, which looks really great, by the way. It goes back to its classical red and blue, and it's really shiny, and you don't really get the greatest look at it, but from the glimpses that they show in it, because he's kind of running around and like it's winter and snowy and it's dark outside, you get the like couple flashes of lights that really brighten up the blue. Looks really good. And then it swings off into the end with his final swing. I really, really loved the character progression for Tom Holland in this because now he's finally on his own. No one knows who he is now. He doesn't have his Aunt May. He doesn't have his love interest. He doesn't have his best friend. He doesn't have any of the Avengers that know him that can help him out. He is now going to start a new chapter in his life to where he is going to be a solo sort of guy for a while. And I really, really digged it. There were also 2 post-credit scenes in this movie. One of them was a little disappointing, and the other one was really, really good. So the first post-credit scene shows Tom Hardy's Venom still sticking in Mexico. So he was nowhere near any of the fight stuff. And, you know, I think that was a little bit bad of a bait and switch from Venom 2, being like, oh, he's in that universe now, and what are they going to do? It is a bit of a disappointment in the end because he just gets drunk and is told about the events in this universe, and he's like, I don't believe it, this, that, or whatever. I thought that kind of was lame, and then he gets sent back without doing anything other than just having a conversation with some dude in a bar. But then you see and get a close-up of a piece of goo that stays on the ground on this bar, and then it moves. So now the symbiote is in the MCU. The symbiote is now a part of this landscape of Spider-Man, you know, things that can happen in this universe, which I think is really cool. I don't know exactly what they're going to do with it, but I think that it would be really interesting because, you know, MCU has done a lot of good things so far with Spider-Man, in my opinion, and I think that they can kind of remedy some of that symbiote Venom stuff that they tried to do in Spider-Man 3. And also the final post-credit scene that they did have is an extended trailer for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse movie, which looks really, really good, and I won't spoil anything about that if they already have that on the internet. If you don't want to hear some spoilers, I might say a couple things here, but you could probably skip a couple seconds here from that. I do like the direction that they're going with it. Wanda's in it, obviously, and I think that they have a lot of cool things that they can do. And they also kind of introduce a second Doctor Strange as like an evil version, kind of like the What If series, which I hadn't seen, but I saw that they did that, which looks like it could be really interesting and really fun. In the end, Spider-Man No Way Home is fan service galore, and I loved it. I love this movie with so much. There's a lot of heart in there. I think they balance the aspects of the fun and the emotional and the hecticness, because if you, at the beginning of the movie, they take place right after Far From Home, and like there's a great scene of him like running around the city being like, what am I gonna do? There's a lot of technical stuff in this movie that I do like too, because there's a long take after that when he's in the apartment trying to explain to Happy and Aunt May what happened. So I really did enjoy, you know, their structure of their story for the most part. I thought the execution of all the technical things that they did in this movie were great. I think the balance of how they managed to make the tones kind of work was really good. And again, the fan service, that's what we were there for, and we got what we wanted, and we should be happy about that. Regardless of this movie, if you think it's the worst movie in the world, we got what we wanted, and I think they did a pretty good damn job in this movie. I'm going to get Spider-Man No Way Home 4.5 stars. Is it a perfect movie? No, and honest to God, my ratings would probably change on the day-to-day, but there are a couple things in this movie that just doesn't work at times, or some slight disappointments here and there, but for the most part, this movie really, really rewards the audience for being fans of Spider-Man. Thank you guys so much for watching. Look forward to more reviews very soon. You can also check me out on podcasts for the Andrew Paul Show. Links will be down in the description below for that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will talk to you all next time.